Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the MetaManiacs Show. I'm your host, Dan Green. This is the show for and by trading card game maniacs, and I'm joined by my co-hosts today. We have Mike Piper.
Hey, everyone.
We have Dillan Straube. And we have Jordan Syverson.
Hello and welcome.
So, guys, today we are talking about a little bit more of a sort of a hot button cultural issue today. We're going to dangerously wade into the possibly piranha infested waters of talking about gatekeeping in games. So I hope everyone, have you brought your armor plated waders for this one?
I rolled a 20, so I'm good.
All right, critical hit. Let's do it. Okay, I'm bringing this up on this episode today because it's just been coming up a little bit in some of the TCG groups lately. The concept of gatekeeping in general. I want to start this by just saying I was taught by a friend, sort of a mentor in college, about anytime you're going to go into a sort of a debate, a dialogue, a diatribe, or whatever, on anything where people may have a disagreement, the most important thing to do is to start by defining our terms. If we can't agree on what our words mean, then we can't properly debate them, and we're just going to sit here and yell at each other the whole time. So I'm going to lead off this discussion. I'm definitely going to open it up to our co-hosts like usual, but I'm going to start just by taking a moment to make sure that we all agree on what we're talking about when we're talking about gatekeeping in games. So the concept of socially gatekeeping something is actually probably most well known from discussions in sort of fandom circles for things. So I'm going to use an example that is I'm certain going to ultimately be a choice I regret, but I'm going to use an example of the Star Wars fandom. Let's say you've got a guy named Joshua, okay, and Joshua's a big Star Wars fan, and Joshua really likes the original trilogy, which he should. And Joshua says, you know what? Anybody who thinks that the prequel movies are better than the original trilogy, they're not a true Star Wars fan, because the original trilogy is best. And this is, a sentiment that you've probably heard from people. And let's say he meets someone named Carolyn, and Carolyn comes up and says, I really like the prequel trilogy. Maybe she grew up with it, whatever. And, it just was like, it struck her more. And she's like, I kind of like it more than those old movies. Those original movies are good, but they're kind of old. I like the new ones with the special flashy effects and stuff. And Joshua says, well, sorry, you don't get the essence of Star Wars. So you don't understand what it means to be a Star Wars fan. So Joshua in this circumstance is gatekeeping, right? Because he's basically constructed this sort of arbitrary gate, and he's defined what is the key required to enter it. You must like this thing in this way. Or to put it in terms that are a little more vague, there has to be some sort of specific feature, some sort of element of yourself that is required to exist for you to join this group. This sort of defined group that he's made. And, maybe Carolyn has watched the movies 600 times and Joshua's watched them 12, right? Like, maybe Carolyn has collected every action figure through the 80s. Maybe she made 3 different Rey costumes, homemade, one for each version of Rey in all the sequel trilogies. There are basically a million other metrics we could come up with to define why she is still, or just always has been, a true Star Wars fan, right? With quotes. And Joshua also could still be a true Star Wars fan by different metrics or by his own metrics. Or the point is, it's all kind of arbitrary, right? And in any case, Joshua's efforts to sort of define what it means to be a fan don't serve any good purpose, except to sort of be exclusionary. The reason people do it may come down to a personal feeling of like, well, he wants to feel like his opinions are sort of validated in what he believes is important and what he believes is good. But ultimately, it's picking a random or arbitrary concept or skill or element of someone's sort of personal identity and deciding this is the way that we are going to determine if someone gets to enter this group. Okay, so that's the concept of gatekeeping, and why it's a little trickier in trading card games, and in general competitive games, is because these games often have a gate of some kind somewhere, right? And that gate can be like qualifying for world championships, earning a bye at a regional, earning points to get promos at special promos at a big event. It can be any number of things. Even if you look at a simple like 8-man local tournament, there is a first place, there is a last place, right? There are 7 gates in between to determine where someone is. So trading card games have a natural tendency towards these gates existing, but in those cases, they're sort of objective gates. And in the Star Wars fandom example, they're sort of subjective gates. Do you guys all kind of agree with that basic setup?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just open the floor with this basic question, okay? Let's say that you're looking at a tournament, and in this tournament, there were, a bunch of great players. It doesn't matter how many people were at the tournament or whatever. Let's say, it was just a big, tough tournament, and someone gets in and wins. And there's another tournament, had a completely different set of players. Doesn't matter how many, just like a lot, right? And someone gets into that one and wins that one. Those two players may start to look at their objective gate they've passed. So like, we both won these tournaments. And they might start to compare and say like, well, how do we know which of us is the stronger player of the two? I don't know. They may have their own reasons for wanting to decide that, right? Does it make sense for these players to do that? Does it make sense for them to come up with a sort of system by which they determine which is better? What purpose does it serve? I guess it's just sort of an open-ended question, but it's something that I want our listeners to think about as we're going through these. And I'm going to pass the mic off here to Mike himself to talk about. Mike, if you can maybe start by like addressing that question a little and go into whatever you want to talk about on the subject of gatekeeping.
I think the reason why people kind of compete with one another and they compare like, who's better than who, is TCGs. Like, I know a lot of people don't like sports, but it's very similar. Like, you want to know who the best is. Like, anytime you watch any type of event, and that's regardless if it's a card game, a fighting game, even a puzzle game tournament. Like when we played Tetris, when I went to Las Vegas and they had a Tetris Attack tournament, like everyone wants to know, watching said tournament, like who is the best. So, there's going to be that comparison between, okay, I played in this tournament and I said, this person played in this tournament, but you didn't play any high level players, or you didn't play nearly as many players. Therefore, your tournament doesn't matter as much as someone else's tournament. So therefore, this person's better than you. We're going to like that. And that's most communities that I've been part of. That ain't just Dragon Ball Super community. I mean, the Pokemon community I know does it. The Yu-Gi-Oh community I definitely know does it. Even the Magic community, you got your Magic Championships. I mean, any community, they're comparing each other. It's like, okay, who is the best? Like, they want to know who is the best player, who are your top players. One thing though, when it comes to the gatekeeping, like, don't discount those players that maybe only won an 8-man local, or maybe only won, only played in like an 8-man tournament, or maybe not played these higher level players. Because there's a few examples. I don't want to get into any names, but we're up here in North Dakota, and we don't have these big massive tournaments that some of these people have in California, Miami, New York, like 70, 80-man locals. And we actually had a regional tournament for the Dragon Ball Z Panini card game. And we had people travel from Florida, California, New York to little old Fargo, North Dakota. And we had one of our locals actually won that tournament. won a complete nobody ended up winning that tournament.
Complete nobody.
What? I don't want to say complete
I'm gonna
nobody.
tell him. I'm telling him.
Yeah, I know. Now you're gonna tell
That's
him.
so funny.
We had several players in the top cut of that event from locals. Yep.
And a lot of people,
three or four.
Yeah.
So.
A lot of these people, they instantly discount these small town folks because it's like, oh, you won an 8-man local, like you matter. And then all of a sudden they get into these bigger tournaments and it's like, wait, what? And maybe they can't travel. Maybe they don't travel as much to go to these bigger events. You know, they can't go 8-12 hours, or they can't pay for the flights and stuff like that. But I think, you know, when it comes to the whole gatekeeping thing, I think we need to keep that in check and go, okay, hey, let's not necessarily discount these accomplishments. Let's put it in perspective. Where was the location of this tournament? Where is this person from? Have they even had a chance to attend some of these higher level events?
Let me, I'm going to send this to Dillan next to talk about. I just want to respond really quick because I know what some people will respond to what you're saying with Mike, which is that the fact is, if someone is competing at larger events more frequently, there are statistically likely more higher caliber players because there's just more of them. And thus it is easier for that player to sort of sharpen their skills at a higher level. The fact is, and this is another thing, I forgot to mention this in the intro, but the idea of gatekeeping is intrinsically tied to a logical fallacy called the no true Scotsman fallacy, which is basically saying that if you just say, well, no true Scotsman would do that, you're setting up an arbitrary rule and it doesn't define any veracity. You know, I think if you're talking about like a truth statement, someone will say X is true, and someone will say, well, no true whatever would say that X is true. Well, that doesn't say anything about whether or not X is true. So you can say the players in North Dakota are highly skilled, and someone can say, well, I mean, if you're not going against these groups of, you know, huge groups of players, you can't be highly skilled. That's not necessarily true. It can be easier. It may be more statistically likely to have more skilled players in an area, but it doesn't actually tell us whether or not someone is more skilled. I will definitely concede that in a bigger area with more people, it simply is likelier that there's more good players because when there's more people congregating, there's more people playing against each other. There's more tournaments. There's, you know, everything. But it doesn't discount someone from being skilled.
And just to add, I mean, and I don't know if there's some sports fans that are actually listening to the podcast, but if you are, perfect example is that's why in the different schools, so like if you watch the NCAA, they got like Division II, Division I, you know, all these different division based upon the size of the school. This is the exact reason for that, is because generally your bigger schools, the bigger cities, they're going to have a lot more of a pool of a talent. And yeah, I like it. And money. There's more involved. Absolutely. But they're going to have more of a pool and they're going to have more of a talent. But that doesn't discount that you're going to have somebody who's really good in Division I or Division II. Biggest example here in North Dakota is we have North Dakota State football, and we actually pulled somebody from our league, and they're playing. Carson Wentz is playing for the Eagles, and he was the quarterback for a division like a lower division school, and then went right into playing for the National Football League.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah. Dylan.
Okay.
What do you got for us?
Yeah, so I've got a couple points. I think what Mike mentioned was great. I think there's a lot there to unpack. 2 points in particular. It's not quantity, it's quality. That's a big portion of all of these arguments. I would actually argue, coming from smaller TCGs, is that oftentimes when you have a smaller community, depending on their commitment level, you can breed a stronger crop of players. I'm going to give a quick example of a name drop. Friend Edward Duvani, great player. He came from Florida. He actually played in the local store that the the North American champion Samsonite Prime and Final Fantasy came from. So they played in the same local events. When he came here, he's actually talked a lot about how he's improved incredibly as a player because our environment was more competitive and more conducive to growth than that environment was. He said even when it was smaller, he said the coachability and the play styles and like the mixture of people who were in the game were in the game. So again, I think that's a really big part of quality. You could ask Edward any day, and he could talk your ear off on how he feels like he's grown, and he has. I mean, I've seen him grow as a player, incredibly since moving to Fargo. So, and I think that I'm not trying to toot our horn at all, but I would think that holds true. So you see a lot of people from our small town area. I think we're just lucky in that we have a good. Well, part of it's luck and part of it is people that are like-minded coming together. But, I'm very fortunate that I came here and I learned TCGs from Dan Green and I learned TCGs from Chris Danzel. And, I was, because of that, I was able to grow into the player that I am today. So I would say that it like Dan said, it's a logical fallacy to say just because there's more people, they're better people. I would actually tend to say that highly efficient groups of people are more likely to succeed. A lot of people would say, to bring this into a psychology background, a lot of people say, why do Asians tend to perform very well and at high aptitudes at certain tasks? And it's because they're a general Eastern culture is meant to specialize into attack the one thing that you want to be good at and be absolutely the best at it. Like be better than anybody else around you at it. Whereas a very Western ideology or mentality is to widen your ability in jack of all trades things. A lot of people want to you've got the freedom to do things and such like that. You can be whatever you want to be. You hear that as a kid. So, not to derail too far, but when you have smaller groups of people that are all like-minded individuals that want to progress towards a certain goal, a certain set goal, rather, your odds of success and growth are just they skyrocket. So to gatekeep people based on location and size of events is just, it's a really poor way to do it. I just personally, but the other side of the argument would be what Mike said before, where I don't think it's an incredible fallacy to go, if I want a Crystal Cup or I want a big regional event or whatever we would like to say, I would go, how would I do against that other person who run a big regional event? How many big regional events have they won? What was the caliber, what was the quantity of people? Because like you said, eventually statistics become more relevant as you have a larger sample size. So I wouldn't say that that's so much a fallacy, but it's important to note from a competition standpoint. I'm really big on stats. I tend to look at my stats to see how I can improve. At the Final Fantasy North American Championship, I didn't make top cut, but I dealt the most damage in the entire tournament, and I took the most damage in the entire tournament, and it was by a lot. So I didn't win every single game, but the games that I lost, I won more than I lost by quite a bit. But the games that I lost were super close matches. I lost by 8 damage. I think when we did the math, I lost by 2 damage once. So every game that I lost, I took the other, it was a fight to just to the grindstone, right? So I see that, and it makes me feel better because I'm okay, I didn't perform as poorly. I obviously fought to the death for every single match that I lost. And I played against incredible players. Whereas some other people might look at your initial stats and be like, well, you were in this big event and you didn't top, so you're not a top quality player, right? They might just say that. And I think that's the fallacy of statistics, is that you can pull whatever you want out of something if you color it that way. So I think that's what I got. It's a mentality thing. Piss off with gatekeeping. You know what? If you want to be a better player, play with people. If you want to be a worse player, don't. But if you don't want to play against people, you don't have to. That's where I'm at with it. I think gatekeeping is incredibly childish and it's irrelevant.
I want to be a worse player, so I'm going to listen to your advice and play less.
There you go.
And
I want to be a
podcast
fun
more.
player.
So
I want to be fun.
it's funny. I've played every role. I've been playing card games for 20 years, and I've done every role from being a highly competitive player in my Magic times to being like strictly a rules lawyer judge in our Score DBZ times to casual gaming, everything in between. And I agree 100%. It's a mentality thing, and it's about how you approach other players and how you interact with other players. And it's about, in my opinion, it's about not discouraging people who are sort of at a different stage in their TCG development, or just simply treating a game differently than you do. You can be super hyper competitive and you can care all these wins are under my belt and that's what's important to me. But it doesn't do you much good to put down other players because maybe they just started playing. They're just figuring it out. And maybe someday they'll be better than you. Like they could be. You don't know that. And just we'll talk about that more at the end. I am waiting here. Jordan's been so patient, and I have bated breath to hear what Jordan has to say about this topic.
Well, mine's pretty short and concise. It's fake news. That's all I got for
it's
you.
the opposite of mine.
All right. Well, guys, that was another episode. Go ahead.
To address the initial question that you posed, I'm surprised no one said this answer. It's going to be kind of I don't know. In my head, it's a little cop-outy, but why wouldn't you just have them play against each other? It's a pretty empirical way to see who's better. Is have them fight. Who's left standing is obviously the better player with an asterisk.
Well, I'll respond to that right away in that something that we need to say at some point during this. Trading card games are inherently random. This isn't
That's
like
one of the things I was going to touch on for mine. Is like with to pile on with Dillan's statistics and what part of the thing I was going to say in addition to the original point I was going to make, which is like there's an inherent amount of chance in this game. There's so many games, and like if any card player thinks about it, like the big tournaments, how literally a single card being a different card could have drastically changed a game. Oh, just so I don't name drop too hard, I'll name drop Dillan Straube. In the regional that he topped here, he drew a Dragon Ball 7 at the exact moment he needed to. If that card had been literally any other card in the deck, that match would have been mine and I would have been in top cut. And it's just those small chances that like there's a lot of skill. You got like 80% skill, but there's still at least, like at the very least, 20% luck in every single game you play. Every card you draw, every card you play, like it's that extra 20% is what allowed that to happen. And sure, you can argue that you can mitigate some of that by what you build in your deck, but like at the end of the day, it's down to whatever you rip off the top of that deck more often than not, which is
Mike Shinoda. It's 100% reason to remember the name. It's just, remember the name. It's 10% luck, 20% skill. Like that's what it is. Like if you're going to look into everything, like you have control over every situation, A, you're wrong and you should rethink your life. But B, exactly what you said. I 100% agree with it. And
and it's even more so. I've gone into a tournament before and I'm like, my deck, just everything's all good and made the wrong meta call. You just go into a matchup and you sit across your opponent and you're just like, well, shake your hand. I mean, you're at advantage. I mean, that's it. So, I mean, it happens.
And then the other point I wanted to get into is something that's more like, I guess, inside every player at one point, which is the internal gatekeeping that people do to themselves. There's so many people, both close friends, that now are like great competitors, both like all the way back to when I first started playing card games back as a wee lad, and even myself when I first started playing card games with Pokemon and Magic back in the day. Like I'd have a couple people at the shop that were like, oh, why don't you come by, try our locals, blah, 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 friendly environment. And I would never want to come because in my head, I was gatekeeping myself by like, oh, I just got in the game. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't have the right cards. Like I wouldn't play at the competitive level because I simply convinced myself that there was some arbitrary gate that I hadn't met yet, so I wasn't allowed to play in those sessions, even though after I got older and started playing, I'm like, most of the time people are just like having fun. Like they don't like, especially at a lot of locals, unless it's tournament season, like most people are like just bringing the memes, just there for the YOLO. And there's people there that are still always like, I got to be practicing all the time, but even if they are, that's the best way that you can learn going forward, is just by like playing against the people. Like, even if someone's trying to gatekeep you, play them. If you win, you prove them wrong. If not, you probably learn something, and just ignore the garbage that they start talking about. Because it's just,
it's okay to lose. You learn so much from a loss. And yeah, I'll do the same thing. If I go to one of those big tournaments, first thing I'm doing, like, I went against the national championship or the national champion in our card game and played him and ended up winning. And I'll play top level players and I'll just be like, all right, hey, let's go. I mean, I may not have a high tournament record as you, but hey, let's just have a match. And you learn so much. I mean, don't please, if you're watching this, do not be discouraged going to your locals. Like, you learn. And if you
tournaments. Big tournaments are the greatest thing. Like when me and Dan, for example, first got into UFS, we decided to go to the Omaha, and we had literally like less than a month of playtime under our belt, and we're just like, F it, let's go, just for fun. These guys seem hype. We could talk to people, see what it is, and every one of us, both me, Dan, and Dillan, not this Dillan, a different Dillan, but we learned so much in that one weekend from the games. Like, we expected to kind of scrub out, but we all did marginally better than we were expecting to do during that tournament. So like the learning example of just playing around and just hearing what other people were doing, and like, it was huge. It was great.
And I bet leaving that tournament, you became you were all much better players afterwards.
Oh yeah.
I would
like the second on the drive home, like all three of us were like, there's so many things we need to change about. Like, there's so many like cards that were like, this card out of the deck, this one gotta put this bad boy in there. So
I want to say with that one, it's about mentality, like you said, and it's about mentality both personally, and it's about your mentality towards other players. And one of the great things that that happened to me in that Omaha event was that I was playing a deck that was like just kind of an unconventional thing I threw together. It seemed kind of fun to try. For any UFS players, it was a jet deck that was utilizing Black Dog's Fangs to do some long sequences of attacks to kill the opponent. Every person I played with, I would play them. If they beat me, I would sit, which happened a bunch. I would then start by asking, okay, how do you think I played? And just like try and solicit actual feedback about. And I was flattered that a few of them said you were actually really strong player. You didn't make many mistakes, whatever. I took forever. That was the one thing, is that like I was very slow and methodical, and I still am, because UFS Universes is a game with a huge board of tons of stuff going on all the time, and I don't like to miss things, right? So
many cards that weekend.
yeah. Oh my God. But anyway, it's about the mentality you take, and I was fortunate that I was taking my learning mentality on, and my opponents were often taking a mentoring mentality on, and that's the key, right? So I'm going to lead into sort of our exit with this concept. And I posted about this on a related thread on the Dragon Ball Super community discussion group. I think the biggest takeaway you can have from this idea of like, first of all, look at yourself internally and think, am I gatekeeping myself? Am I gatekeeping other people? If you decide that you are, you got to think about what Goku would do here. Okay, we bring Goku into the mix, and I bring this. If you're not familiar with Goku, I don't know how. Like, right, he's like a cultural icon at this point. He's got a Macy's Day parade float and everything. But there's Goku. Mike's got a pop figure if you're watching the video version. But so I'm not going to get into who Goku is. But the concept of Goku is that he is the fighter who is at the. He's not only one of the strongest fighters in the universe. As of Dragon Ball Super, he's one of the strongest fighters in all universes. He is just like the toppest of the top tier right there, with others in his echelon, but he's up there, right? But the key to Goku's character is that he never uses his accomplishments to grade other people against him, right? He will still spar with Gohan, and he'll go his strongest, but he won't expect that he's just gonna win. He will spar with anybody at any skill level, and know that just because they haven't won all these tournaments, just because they haven't defeated all these great baddies that he's gone up against through the years, doesn't mean that they can't pull something out that'll trick me and beat me, or just be stronger than me suddenly. Maybe they've been training secretly, And that is like a key component of Goku's character and why he is the protagonist. And we want people to be Gokus when they're talking to their local players. And if you're not doing that, if instead what you're doing is you're going like, well, you know, I've won these tournaments, I've beaten these players, I've done all, you know, I've had all these great accomplishments. So I don't think that you're ready to talk to me about competitive, or I don't think I need to listen to anything you have to say about competitive card games or whatever.
Don't be a Vegeta.
You're not being Vegeta. Actually, I wasn't going to use Vegeta as the example. You're being Mr. Satan. You're being Hercule, where you're saying, I am the strongest in the world because I have all these belts. I've won all these things. And nobody can beat me because I have the accomplishments here. And clearly, as we learn, and that's Cell Saga Hercule, right, for the fans, because I think he's become more of a lovable oaf in the later ones. And he understands now that, like, these guys are way out of his league. And he's seen them fight.
He grew.
He grew as a character, and that's what we're asking everyone to do, right? If you're
grow as a character.
You're the type of person, it is perfectly fine to look at your accomplishments and be like, I feel so good about myself. I feel like I have done what I want to achieve. I feel like I am a strong player. It is not okay, in my opinion, to then take those achievements and go, you can't talk to me till you have something like this. You can't, you know, that is the toxic version of gatekeeping that I think we need to try and do away with. And this is where I need to have my waders on, because I'm making these statements that people might disagree with and they might come at us in the comments, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about this. So go ahead and leave your comments down below. What do you think about gatekeeping in competitive card games? Is there some merit that we're not thinking of to comparing things that way? Or how do you show your how do you use your skill to mentor and grow your player base and your players to have greater competition like Goku wants? He just wants everyone to be as strong as possible so that he can be stronger too. So guys, I think that's going to end this short episode. We're going to go into an expanded one right after this. If you guys are not a patron yet, if you're not patrons yet of MetaManiacs, on our Patreon, we have expanded episodes where you can listen to or watch a much longer, in-depth discussion on things that often goes off the rails. And I honestly have no idea what we're going to talk about yet in the expanded episode. It's going to start related to this, and then who knows where it's going to go.
Probably cake.
It's just $2 a month. What's that, Dylan?
Probably cake. Something food-related. Mike's here.
Net code. And food. Yep. These are the topics that these guys like to talk about. So please, we would love if you would want to support MetaManiacs by becoming a patron. It's just $2 a month. You get access to all the expanded episodes, plus other behind-the-scenes footage and other cool stuff. In just a moment, you're going to see on the screen here, if you're watching the video, all of our current patrons, and we appreciate you guys all so much. We have so much love and support so far, and we're just trying to continue to grow and expand our reach and who we can talk to about card games and kind of spread the love as much as we can. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the MetaManiacs Show, or listening to it on our audio platforms now. And we will see you guys in the next one. Take care.
Take it easy, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, babies.